Role of Spirituality in Life's Purpose by Ayan Farwar. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Hi, this is Ayan Farwar. I'm glad you're here. If it's your first time here, this channel is about self-realization and honoring our life purpose and meaning. If you're interested in these topics, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay connected. Today, I would like to share a perspective on the role of spirituality in our life. In this perspective, spirituality is viewed not as invitation to withdraw from life's impulses, but rather as a means to find peace and clarity of mind in order to realize our potentialities and fulfill our true destiny. This presentation may seem a bit philosophical, but I hope the ideas presented here can inspire you to contemplate on what spirituality means to you. Is that empowering you to find and fulfill your life purpose? Or inviting you to a more passive state of spiritual stillness and comfort? If you reflect on the quote I used here, do you see yourself as a human being having a spiritual experience? Or a spiritual being having a human experience or adventure in this world? Our connection to spirituality is either inherited from our cultural or religious background, acquired from teachings of spiritual masters, or developed through self-directed soul-searching. Because of this diversity, our goal is not to focus on specifics of different belief systems or traditions, but rather view spirituality as an inseparable dimension of human experience, a dimension that has greatly influenced our cultures and communities in all corners of the world and for thousands of years, maybe even since our ancestors first saw the night sky. In this presentation, we'll focus on three fundamental questions. What is spirituality? How do we experience spirituality? What role does spirituality play in our lives? Let's contemplate on these questions. What is spirituality? Defining spirituality is not as trivial because spiritual experience is tremendously diverse and subjective. But in simplest terms, we can view spirituality as a sense of connection, a connection to a numinous source deep within us, a source that has a presence much greater than ours. What that numinous spiritual source is not as important as what its connection means to us and how it influences our life. Spirituality is natural and fascinating to us, as if there is a spiritual seed planted deep within all of us. A seed that once sprouted would continue to grow and rise, either consciously or subconsciously. We can witness this fact especially in people who had transformative spiritual connections, such as lucid dreams, shamanic awakening, experience of psychedelic or other non-ordinary states of consciousness, or even near-death experience. These people become highly spiritual after such connection. They also tend to make significant adjustments in their core beliefs and guiding principles in life, only as a result of that spiritual connection and the insights that came with it. So spirituality is an essential connection and an inseparable dimension of our being. How do we experience spirituality? Spiritual connection is not experienced through our 5 primary senses or philosophical contemplations of our rational minds. So how do we experience spirituality or receive spiritual insights? We experience spiritual connection through what I refer to as our inner senses. These inner senses are intuition and imagination. Intuition can be defined as inner voices of wisdom or insights that come from another source within us. This source is fundamentally distinct from our intellect or rational mind. Metaphorically speaking, we can think of this source as our higher mind, our heart, our gut, or our soul. We can also call it our inner wisdom in philosophical term, self in psychological term, or our inner guide, celestial twin, or angel of individuation in shamanic terms. Imagination here can be viewed as inner visions and simultaneous acts of perceiving and revealing. To simplify this, imagination here is not limited to simply visualizing images we create in our minds. It also involves seeing and interacting with numerous images and symbols that are already present in our inner world. Practical examples of interactive form of imagination are dreams, especially lucid dreams, shamanic journeys, and active imagination in depth psychology of C.G. Jung. I called intuition and imagination inner senses here because they are extensions of our rational mind and our 5 primary senses. When we have spiritual experience, we are essentially using our intuition and imagination to sense, observe, and receive information and insights. What role does spirituality play in our lives? So far, we described spirituality as a sense of connection to a numinous source and the inner world within us. We also highlighted intuition and imagination as our inner senses through which we connect and interact with this spiritual inner world. But what is the purpose of all of that? What role does spirituality play in our life? Let's contemplate on these. It is not easy to generalize the role of spirituality in life because we experience it at a very personal level. But I can highlight 3 such potential roles based on my personal observations and experience. These are spirituality as a remedy for our fear of the unknowns, spirituality as an ultimate purpose and goal of our life, and spirituality as a mean to discover and actualize our true potentials. And the list can go on. Let's focus on these. Spirituality as a remedy for our fear of the unknowns. When we are first born, we are biologically most vulnerable and weak. Ironically, as we get old, approaching the end of our lives, our bodies are back to this vulnerable and weak state. So, our biological journey in life begins and ends with an inherent weakness and vulnerability rooted deeply within us. Yet, in the course of life, our rational mind does everything in its power to run away from this weakness by chasing safety, power, and wealth. That is probably why already powerful people seek more power, and highly affluent people want more wealth. So there is an inherent existential anxiety in all of us that makes our rational mind fearful of the unknowns. We can see examples of this fear, especially related to death anxiety, or in many cancer patients who develop anxiety and/or depression after diagnosis. A rational mind is simply not fit to deal with existential anxiety. That is probably why our psyche welcomes connection to spirituality and its comforting energy, especially at the time of existential crisis. Spiritual connection is an effective way to overcome our existential fear of the unknowns, because it signifies existence beyond our material world. Spirituality as an ultimate purpose and goal of our life. Spiritual connection can also be highly transformative and mind manifesting. Depending on the depth and richness of experience, spiritual connection can be so captivating to the point that it overshadows all other dimensions of our life experience as humans. In a way, our spiritual connection can become all we need in life and the ultimate purpose and goal of our existence. Spirituality has life-promoting values, but if we over-identify with it, everything else in life, including our passion, talents, and creativity, can become secondary, leading to a life experience that is deeply spiritual, but not as life-promoting or helpful in realizing our true potentials in life. In psychology, over-identifying with the spirituality is sometimes referred to as spiritual bypass, which is a form of distraction and suppression of essential feelings and life-promoting impulses in favor of maintaining a state of peace in a spiritual dimension. In a way, spiritual bypassing can prevent us from ever discovering or actualizing our highest potentialities in life in order to fulfill our true destiny. Spirituality is a mean to discover and actualize our true potentials. There is another role that spirituality can play in life, a role that is nourishing, life-promoting, and not in any conflict with life impulses that make us human. As mentioned in one of my earlier presentations linked here, as human beings, we have three fundamental needs which are having peace, having purpose, and having meaning. Having peace is about being aware of our thoughts and emotions and at peace with ourselves and others. Having purpose is about having a sense of direction in life and what we are here to do. Having meaning is about knowing the true meaning of our life and its spiritual importance. Having peace is the most important of all, but it can only be achieved through some emotional and psychological healing. This is where connection to spirituality can play a big role. In fact, most effective psychological and coaching approaches today are considered psycho-spiritual in nature, which means they use spiritual resources within us to promote psychological healing and personal transformation. 3 notable examples of psycho-spiritual approaches are Carl Jung's depth psychology, IFS self-leadership, and psycho-shamanism or shamanic practices. All these 3 approaches use spiritual resources to various degrees to help us connect internally in search of new insights, resolution, and emotional healing. Peace and emotional and psychological well-being is the most fundamental need we have in life. Everything else starts from there. Spiritual connection helps us achieve and maintain this state of peace and find clarity of mind, and by way of that, envision and realize our true purpose in life. Closing thoughts. In closing, I hope you can take a few minutes now to contemplate on what role spirituality plays in your life. Is that role life-promoting and empowering you to follow your life purpose and transform to your best version of being? Or it's more comforting you in a passive state of stillness and spiritual serenity? Contemplative moments like these could be an opportunity to adjust or reaffirm your views and guiding principles in life, and to try to bring them in better alignment or closer to your ideals and aspirations. Living a true spiritual life is not about suffering or withdrawals from human impulses. It's about tuning in to spiritual insights coming from the source of wisdom within you to achieve inner peace and honor your true life purpose. If you have found this presentation useful, please like and share it with your like-minded friends. Also, please subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, and share your thoughts and comments so I feel encouraged to create more content in the future. Blessings.